Hi there guys, and welcome to another video. Now in today's video we're going to be looking at a new feature in Unraid 7 which is called container networking. Now we can do this now directly from the GUI, and to demonstrate container networking I'm also going to be showing you how to install an absolutely awesome VPN container called Gluetun VPN. Now what inspired me to do this? Well, in fact it was a Sega Dreamcast, and it was this Dreamcast here that inspired me to do this video. Now why, you might be wondering? Well, I had a little bit of time this weekend, and as some of you may well know, I like my retro gaming, so I put my Dreamcast inside this cool shell and also installed something into it which is called GDEMU. And what this does is allow me to not have to put discs into my machine but play my games off an SD card. But I thought to myself, well, how am I going to get my disc games off the GD discs, because they're not standard CDs or DVDs, onto the SD card? So I had to do a bit of a grey area and download the games that I already own from a site and then put them onto the SD card. And now, as everyone knows, if you're using torrents, no matter what you're downloading, whether it's Linux ISOs or anything else, it's always best not to have your home IP address showing when you're doing so. And the ideal way to do that is to use a VPN. Now, the old way we used to do this was we used a container something like Deluge VPN, which had the VPN already built inside of the container. And for those of us who like using Usenet, we'd use something like SAB VPN or NZBGet VPN. But now with the release of Unraid 7 and how easy it is to do container networking, well, we can run a VPN container in the excellent Gluetun VPN, and we can link any other container's networking to go straight through that and use that VPN for its network connection as well. So it's really awesome. So I've got it set up on my server in Finland in the Hetzner data center. I'll quickly show you that there. Okay, so we can see the Gluetun VPN one running at the top here, and we can see its network type. It's on a bridge network, but also I've got Tailscale installed in this container as well. Now, if you haven't already seen it, then I've done a very long tutorial over on the Uncast channel where I talk about all the new Tailscale integration in Unraid 7. It's really awesome. And if you haven't seen that, well, if you've got time to watch it, it's about an hour and a half long, well, go across and check that out. But what you'll see here with the Firefox and the Deluge containers here, the networking type here is set to container. And we can see the container it's using is Gluetun VPN. So both Firefox and Deluge, all of their traffic, it's sharing the network with Gluetun VPN. So all of the internet traffic is going to be routed through the VPN that Gluetun's using. So what we can do is we can put as many containers as we want through a single VPN. And also you can see, because I've got Tailscale installed here, I'm actually using this as well as a Tailscale exit node, which allows me on any of my computers anywhere in the world to route traffic out through this VPN as well. Now we're going to be looking at setting all of this up on my server at home, but I just want to show you the speed of the VPN. If we open up my Firefox container here and then go to speedtest.net so we can do an internet speed test, well, we can see here the download speeds are really good. So normally when you run a combined container with a VPN built inside, it's difficult to know the speeds you're actually getting, or the theoretical speeds that you can get. So by connecting Firefox as one of the containers going into Gluetun VPN, well, it's really easy to track the speed of what the container is. Now, before we go ahead and set all of this up on my other server back home, I just want to show you what happens if we actually make a small change into what I call the host container. And by the host container, I mean the container whose networking is being used by other containers. We can see here, now I've made this change, that the containers that are dependent on that container, they're rebuilding themselves automatically. Now this is a new feature of Unraid 7, so if a change is made in the actual host container, the child containers will rebuild themselves, ensuring their connection remains stable. Okay, so let's go across onto my server at home. So let's go to Imperial here, and on the Docker page here, well, I've only got FileZilla here. So let's go ahead and install Gluetun VPN. So let's start by searching for its name. and click on to install. Now we can see here that the template for this is really big. But don't let this overwhelm you. There's a lot of things here, but it's not as hard to set up as you might think. Now the first thing we're going to need is obviously a VPN provider. Now Gluten supports many different VPN providers. The default one here that's auto selected is private internet access, but there's many others you can choose here as well. Now I'm a big fan of private internet access. I think they got really good prices and I've been using them since probably about 2015. Now if you don't already have a VPN provider, then I'd really appreciate you signing up using my affiliate link in the description. You'll get a really good price and it really does help out the channel. Okay, so the first variable we're going to need to set is the time zone here. I'm in the UK, so for me, that's Europe/London. But make sure you put the time zone that you're in this variable here. Now, like I said, choose the VPN service provider that you're using. I'm using private internet access, so I'm going to leave mine as is. Now for VPN type, we can use openvpn or wireguard if our VPN provider supports it. I'm going to be using openvpn here. Now for VPN interface, we should leave that as is. And next here, if we're using openvpn, we can choose whether to use UDP or TCP. Now for speed, I recommend using UDP, but there are times where maybe your ISP might block things where you might want to use TCP instead. Now next we need to put in the openvpn username and password. So for me, this is just my private internet access username and my private internet access password. So if we scroll down here, OpenVPN version, we can leave that as is. And there's nothing else here we really need to do. Now if you're using WireGuard, the WireGuard properties are here. But if we're using OpenVPN, well, we don't need to really install anything else. But if you're using WireGuard, we'll need to put in a WireGuard private key and also a WireGuard public key. And underneath here, we'll need a WireGuard address. And all of this you'll be able to find from your VPN provider. Now next here, server regions. This is where we specify basically which endpoint our VPN is going to use. So no more having to download an OpenVPN configuration file from private internet access. I'm just going to put in under server region Netherlands here, as that's the exit point that I want to use. And I think I need a capital there for Netherlands. And again, if we scroll down here, now we'll notice here we've got a firewall. Now this should be left on unless you find something's not working, and you can just turn it off just for testing. But make sure you leave the firewall turned on, and we'll come back and look at some of these in a moment, because I'm also going to install Tailscale into this container so I can use it as an exit node and be able to use a VPN anywhere, and also be able to share that with any friends and family who also want to be able to use this VPN. Now with that done, if we just scroll down, there's nothing else really we need to actually put here. You can see by default the firewall will block malicious sites, which is nice. If you didn't want it to do that, I don't know why you wouldn't want it to do that, but you could turn it off if you wanted to. And here we can also block ads. So we can block ads on the VPN by enabling this variable here. I'm going to leave that off for the time being. And I'm going to scroll right down to the bottom here, because that's really everything we need to put in. So with that filled out, we can just click on apply and pull down the container. Now, one thing I like about Unraid 7 is we can just click here on view log and see what's going on straight away. So I'm going to do that now. And we can see here, everything's absolutely fine. There's no errors here. And we can see the public IP address, which is my private internet access Netherlands address here. And it says we're running on the bleeding edge of the latest version of this container. So let's close this now and click on to done. And here we can see Gluten's running absolutely fine. Now Gluten needs to run as a bridge network, so don't change that. Make sure you leave that as is. And so now to test this, I'm going to add a Firefox container. So again, let's go to apps and do a search for Firefox. I'm going to use the Linux server one here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to download this as is, because I want to show you something that's very important that we need to make sure we do when we do container networking. So first I'm going to just download this as a bridge network. Okay, so that's done. We can see it's quite a large container at just under a gig. So let's click on to done. And we can see here now we've got Gluetun VPN and Firefox running. Now they're both on a bridge network. So at the moment Firefox isn't using the VPN at all. So let's open up Firefox here, open its web UI, and I'm going to go to whatismyip.com. Now first let's have a look at all of the adverts around here. And here we can see my IP location is London, UK. Now I've blurred out my IP address here for obvious reasons because this is actually my home IP, so I don't want that to show. So now let's close this and shut down Firefox, and now I'm going to connect this onto Gluetun VPN. So for that all we need to do is go to edit here, then under network type we'd change that from bridge across to container. So now this allows us to choose another container to route our network through. So obviously I'm not going to use FileZilla, I'm going to use Gluetun VPN here. Now there's one very important thing. We need to remember the ports that are being used by this container. So it's port 3000 and 3001. And if we click edit here, we can see that both of them are TCP. So we need to make a note of those, so 3000 and 3001. So if I click apply now and then done, we can see here that the network is using the Gluetun VPN container. But if you notice here, there are no exposed ports. And that's because now Firefox doesn't have its own network stack. It's using Gluetun VPN's network stack. So I need to add that port 3000 and 3001 to Gluetun VPN so we'll be able to access the web UI. So let's do that now. I'm going to click here and go to edit, and I'm going to scroll right down to the bottom. And in fact, while we're here, let's go up a little bit and let's turn block ads on to on. And at the bottom here, I need to add those two ports. So I'm going to click here, add another port path, variable, label or device, and obviously choose port. And here I'm going to call this Firefox 1 and the container port 3000 and the host port the same 3000. Connection type is TCP, so I'm going to click add, and I'm also going to add the same, that second port, so let's call that Firefox 2, which is 3001. Okay, so let's click on to add and click on to apply. Okay, so here we can see the Firefox containers rebuilding because changes were made, and now this is connected to Gluetun VPN. But if we click onto this, currently we can see that there's no web UI button. Now this might change in an upcoming version of Unraid, but for the moment we just have to put in that IP address manually. So I can see what it is here. So I'm going to copy this, open a new tab here, and here we can see that we're straight in. So now I'm going to go to what is my IP, and here we can see that my IP address is now in Amsterdam. So the VPN is working absolutely fine. And hey, look, all those ads have gone. So another bonus. What a cool container, hey? So now I think let's do a speed test, see what kind of speed we're getting. Okay, and again, speedtest.net often has a whole load of ads. They're all being blocked. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on to go. And let's do our speed test. Okay, so we can see the speed isn't as good as in the data center, but it's still pretty acceptable. If I was to use an endpoint a bit closer to me, then I'd probably get better speeds, but I'm getting about 100 up, 100 down. So not too bad. Also, the family are all watching things like Netflix at the moment, so if I was to close all of that down, I may well get a better speed than I am here. So anyway, we know that we've got the potential to be able to use the VPN at this type of speed, so that's pretty cool. So let's close this now. And now I want to show you, if I go to the web UI here of Gluetun VPN, we can see here it just says unauthorized. Now that's because with Gluetun VPN, there isn't really a web UI to use as such, but what we could do if we wanted to, if I was to click edit here, and then toggle this across to advanced view here, and scroll down here, we can specify a web UI, and I could change that port to be 3000. Now, obviously, if we have multiple containers connected to this, we would only be able to choose one to have a web UI button. So I'm going to use Firefox here, and just have that to be my web UI button at present. So let's scroll right down to the bottom here again and click on to apply. Here we can see, because we made a change, Firefox is rebuilding. And now if I go here and I click web UI, we can see I'm straight into the Firefox container. So just a little tip, it's quite useful to be able to do that. So what next? Well, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to install Tailscale into this VPN as well. So what that will allow me to do is then use this VPN container on my Tailnet as an exit node. So if I take my laptop outside of the house and I want to use the VPN through Amsterdam, well, I just need to connect to the exit node that I'm going to install into Gluetun VPN now. So let's do that. I'm going to click edit and let's scroll down here. And here under use Tailscale, I'm going to toggle that, setting that to on. Now for the host name, I'm going to just call this Netherlands hyphen and then VPN. And here under be an exit node, I want to set this to yes. So this will allow other things on my Tailnet to be able to use this for their internet needs. Now Tailscale serve, we can leave that set to on. Okay, so that's everything set up for Tailscale for the moment. Although in fact we will actually come back to this part in a minute and I'll show you why in just one moment. But whilst we're here, let's make some changes to the firewall. So if we scroll down here, firstly under firewall outbound subnets, we want to put our local subnet in here. So for many of you, it might be what we can see here, 192.168.1.0/24. So basically whatever your server IP is, and for instance mine is 10.10.20.196, so just take away the last digits before the last dot and put a 0 and /24, and that will do the CIDR of your actual subnet. But also we want to put in the Tailscale subnet as well. So I'm just putting in a comma here and then I'm adding the Tailscale subnet, which is 100.64.0.0/10. Now I'm going to also put in the Tailscale subnet in one other place. So if we scroll down here, I'm going to put it as a .private address as well. So I don't need to put in my subnet earlier because this range here will cover me. And also if you're using 192, we can see that you're covered here as well. So what I'm going to do after this local range here, this 127, after the first comma, I'm going to paste in the Tailscale subnet as well. And I'm going to just put another comma at the end. Okay, so let's scroll down to the bottom and click on to apply to re-pull down the container with Tailscale in it. Now this time it's very important we click view container log, and here we can see that it says it can't detect a persistent Docker directory for the .tailscale state. So what is the .tailscale state? Well, basically that's a location where Tailscale saves its configuration. If we don't have that when you restart the container or update the container, well the Tailscale is not going to have its configuration. So let's click on to done here. And now we need to look at Gluetun VPN and see where it stores its app data. Well, here I can see the app data for Gluetun VPN is mapped onto here /Gluten. So I'm going to copy that here, and now I'm going to go back here to edit, and I'm going to scroll back down to Tailscale. And so here at the bottom, we need to toggle Tailscale show advanced settings, and let's go down a little bit here. And here where it says Tailscale state directory, I'm going to paste in that location /Gluten, and then I'm going to put a / and then .tailscale states. Now a lot of containers you don't have to do this, it will automatically find a location to put this, but if you get the message like I did, well, you're going to have to set a directory manually yourself. Now again, like I said earlier, for more information on Tailscale in Unraid, then please see the tutorial on the Uncast show. Okay, so now let's go back and click on view container log, and here we can see it's downloading and installing Tailscale into the container. So now I need to authenticate this into my Tailnet. So I'm going to click onto this link here, and I'm going to log into my Tailscale account. Now I'm going to do this off camera, and I'm going to just click on to connect. Okay, so that's connected now. So now again on my laptop, I've gone to whatismyipaddress.com, and we can see here that my ISP is vNextAB in London, which is my internet provider. And again, I've blurred out my real IP address here. And in fact, I don't actually live in London, but my ISP routes its traffic out through here. I'm actually about here, if anyone's interested. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my Tailscale icon here, and under Exit Nodes, I'm going to click here onto Netherlands. Okay, so I can see here that the exit node's active because the little arrow's there on Tailscale. So now I'm just going to refresh this page. And here we can see that I'm in Amsterdam. So basically, wherever I take my laptop, if I'm connected to this exit node, I'll be able to use my VPN. So again, we may also do a speed test. It's going to be about the same speed as it was with my Firefox container, I'm sure. Okay, so my upload this time a little bit faster. Maybe the internet's not being used as much. Okay, so we tested the container speed with both Tailscale and with the Firefox container. So now let's add some other containers and route their traffic through Gluten. So the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to put on Deluge. So obviously I'm going to type in and do a search for Deluge. Now we can see here there is a container with a VPN built in, but we're not going to be using this one today. I'm going to be using BinHex's regular Deluge container. So I'm going to click on to install here. Okay, so now let's fill out the template. So the first thing I'm going to do here is obviously change the network type from bridge onto container, just as we did with Firefox. And under container network, obviously I'm going to choose Gluten. Okay, so we're going to need to remember what these ports are here. Now these first two, they're probably TCP, but let's double check. Yep, that one's TCP, as is the one underneath. Now this one here, it says it's TCP, so we know, but we can just double check anyway. And this one here is UDP. So I'm going to open up Notepad here, and I'm going to put in the ports so I can easily remember. So we've got 8112, 58846, and 58946 TCP, and the same 58946 UDP. Okay, so we can come back to that in a moment. Now I'm just going to point the /data here to my download share. Okay, so finally at the bottom here, we can see this variable shared network. And if we read what it says here, it says to specify whether the container is sharing a network with another VPN container. Now our container is, and it says that if it is sharing the network, we should set this to yes. But this is no longer necessary, and in fact it doesn't actually work. If I set this to yes here and click on to apply and pull down the container, we can see the container doesn't actually start. So although the Gluetun VPN is actually running, well, Deluge thinks it isn't and shuts itself down. So what we need to do is to just set this variable to no. Now don't worry, it doesn't mean that if the VPN is down, then Deluge will be able to download anything. It won't, it will have no internet, and I'll show you that in a moment. But I believe because all of this type of feature is now built into the container networking in Unraid 7, that we don't actually need to have that. Okay, so let's add Deluge's ports into Gluten, just as we did with Firefox. So I'm going to click here onto Edit, scroll right to the bottom, and click on here, add another path port variable, label or device, and obviously choose port. So I'm going to call this Deluge 1, and we need the first port here, 8112, and now the second port, and now the next, and finally that last UDP port. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to click on to apply, and done. We can see here the container's rebuilding. Now, in fact, what I think I'm going to do is, if you remember earlier, I set the web UI of Gluten to actually open Firefox's web UI. But in fact, I think it's going to be more useful for me for it to actually open Deluge's. So I'm going to copy here the port that Deluge uses for its web UI. And I'm actually going to make a change and pop the port in here. Okay, again, we can see the two dependent containers rebuilding. Okay, so now if I start up the Deluge container, and on Gluten, I go to the web UI, We can see here that I'm straight into Deluge. Okay, so let's test downloading something. So I'm going to download Ubuntu here. So let's add Ubuntu to Deluge. And we can see Deluge is downloading that through the VPN. So what happens then if I actually was to stop this container? Well, as you can see, the container just doesn't work. And if I go into a console window inside of it, and I go curl ifconfig.io, there's no internet, it can't resolve the host. So let's start back up Gluten and open back up the web UI. We can see this is continuing to download. And now, if I open a console window inside of Deluge and I type curl ifconfig.io, we can see there is the IP that the container is using, that being my private internet access VPN IP, not my home IP. So, all working nicely. Okay, so now you can see there's a few more containers going through the VPN. I've got an R stack going through it here. Now, there's one thing I want you to be aware of, is often people, they use container name resolution when using a custom Docker network. Even if Gluetun VPN was not on a bridged network and it was on a custom Docker network, in fact, I'm going to show you that now. So if I put this one on ProxyNet here, now I know earlier I said that this has to be on a bridged network, but this custom network is also a bridged network, so it would work absolutely fine. So now you might expect, because this is a custom Docker network, that for instance from Gluetun VPN I can actually ping binhex Deluge. So I'll show you that now. So basically name resolution doesn't exist. That's because these don't have their own separate IP that's been given out by the Docker DNS, so their host names are not registered anywhere. So with that being said, that's why I wanted to show you this R stack. So if I go here to binhex radar and I go to settings here, now if I add a download client and let's add ncbget here, well, I couldn't put in here binhex-ncbget and use the host name because just as before, that's not going to work. So I just have to put in the IP address of my server. So when using container networking for everything, we need to use actual IP address. So when adding a download client in any of the R's, or if you're using something like Prowler, everything needs to be done by IP addresses. Okay, so let's actually test this working. The searches are all going to be done through the VPN. Now, if we go across here to this website, this public domains list here, all of these movies here, they're not owned by any government, organisation or individual, and so they're just common property, all having no copyright. So this one here, I'm going to grab this 1925 one here, Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ. So I'm going to click Add New and do a search. So it's this one here. This is the copyright-free one. So let's add that. And if we go across to ncbget, we can see that's downloading fine. Now also, if we go across now and open a console inside of the container, and again if we curl ifconfig.io, we can see that the IP address is that of my private internet access VPN. Okay guys, so that wraps up this video, brings us to the end. Now I think Gluetun VPN is a really awesome VPN container. Definitely worth giving a try if you use VPNs on your server. And also the new container networking in Unraid 7, well, you know, in my opinion, another really, really awesome feature. Anyway guys, so it's almost Christmas and I hope you guys are going to have a great Christmas and a superb new year. And I look forward to bringing you lots and lots of new video tutorials in 2025. Now, if you like this video, I'd really appreciate you giving it a thumbs up. That lets other people know that this video, they might like it too. And if you're not yet a subscriber, well, please subscribe to the channel. Now, I just want to give a really big thank you to all of my patrons and supporters out there. Thank you so much, guys, for all of your support. I really, really do appreciate it. And if you want to join these great bunch of people, then please see the links in the description below. Anyway guys, it's time for me to go now, but whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in the next video.